So for now, we will be focusing on the Java-based VPM. Okay, so with that, what is the structure of the VPM? What is this VPM? So basically, a VPM is composed of two important files. We have the VPM CPL. The VPM CPL, this is the generated CPL code or content policy language from the VPM activity. Basically, your rules, your layers, your objects, it is written in a content policy language. XML is the visual state of the VPM that the user will see. That is why it is common that people or administrator of proxy would use VPM because they don't need to learn programming. Okay, because we use a content policy language. It is a programming language. It is a rule-based language used to create policy in proxy. So with VPM, because it has a visual state using XML, then you don't have to learn all the codes to create policies. So it's easier for you to create policy. Okay? So these two combined together forms your VPM. All right? So these two must be combined together. So to show you this in proxy, okay, so let me just launch my my proxy here. So I'm using a Java-based management console. That's why you saw all these pop-ups. Or you can use IE also. You can. So you can create policy under configuration tab after you log in. You scroll all the way down to policy. You click on the policy files. You see here, visual policy files. You click on that. Here are your two files, the VPM CPL and the VPM XML. Okay, you can actually view it here. I don't have any policy, I think, for now. That's why it's empty, right? So it's nothing there. Likewise, this one also, I don't have anything. So if I install, that's also empty. Now, even though you have the option to install over here, it is just a text edit this method. All right? Now, you can use this when you want to back up the VPN. So what method do we want to use? So over here, you can launch the VPM or the Visual Policy Manager. Click on this. As you notice, we have the Web Visual Policy Manager or the Web VPM, and then we have also the Java VPM. The Java VPM has been around for some time because we are moving away from Java soon. Then we introduce the Web VPM. Okay? But for now, we talk about the Java VPM. So to launch it, just click on it. So it will launch this Visual Policy Manager. Right? It is currently empty. There is no policy as you can see here. Let me just start to create policy. Okay? And so that I can show you. So when you create a policy, you need to install the policy. But we'll go to that in a short while. But really what I wanted to show you is that since I have created a policy, which is a very simple one, under the web access layer, we can now see that we have now a generated CPL for that VPM policy I just created. All right? And likewise, I also now have a generated XML for that policy I have just created. So since you notice that it is just a text that you see here, you can in fact edit this, but it is not recommended to do it outside of the VPN to edit it over here, because the policy might be installed, but you may not be able to see, or you will not see a visual state of it, because you need to know how the proxy would create an XML version of that policy, which is, not advisable. So what do you use this for? You can use it as a backup. So you can copy all this, put this in a notepad, and save it somewhere, right? So you can copy this, put this in a notepad, right? And then name this as your VPM. Let's say this is your VPM CPL. Right? And then likewise with this VPM CPL. Right? This is your, XML. Save. So you have these two different backups, right? Your CPL and XML. You can then restore it if you wanted to eventually. Okay? This is just one way of, creating backup in proxy for the policy. It's of course a good practice to create a backup every time. All right. There are other ways to create backup in proxy, which is under archive here, but that's just beyond the point right now. My point here is that you do not edit the VPN using this method here. Now take note that even though you notice that we have two types of VPN here, the Java VPN and the web VPN, if you launch the web VPN, both of this web VPN and the Java VPN are using the same backup. Okay, so this is the web visual policy manager. So as you can see here, I have created a policy using the Java legacy web access layer, any deny. Here I have a web access layer. It's a layer name. It is a web access layer. And the rule of this, you have only one rule. All right? So expand that. So this is any deny. Right? You click on that, you expanded it. So this is the rule. So basically, it is just the same. Both the Visual Policy Manager, the web-based, and the Java VPN is using the same backup. All right, these two files. Okay, so they're just using the same files. All right, so with that, let's understand a bit more about what are the different things we can see inside the VPN. Now, in VPN, it's composed of several layers. Okay, layers. In layers, you can create rules. Okay, so in rules, so each layer you can create rules. In rules, you have what we call objects. So you right-click on it, and then new. These are different objects. So you can have objects under your source trigger. You can have object under your destination trigger, service time action. So each layer would have different trigger, right? So for example, SSL intercept layer, you can see you have the source destination, of course, service and action will be different, right? So because this is SSL intercept, that's why you have different options available for you there. Compared to the web access layer action, you have different actions that you can configure over there. That's why you have several layers, because the layers will be doing differently. Okay? So before we talk about different layers, let's try to understand first how are these evaluated, right? So first of all, we do know that before the proxy will apply policy, okay, before the proxy will start to apply policy, you need to have a service that is set to intercept first. Okay? So you need to have this service that intercepts first. Then the proxy will start to apply policy. Okay? But what we noticed so far is that the proxy has what we call default policy. Okay? And then afterwards, I can also create policy in my VPM, which is this policy also. So I have a default policy, and then I have a VPM policy. Then what is the order of policy evaluation then? All right? So the order is like this. So I install this policy. So now, note that I have a default policy of allow here. All right? All right, so it is denied. Why? Because basically what happened is when I try to send this traffic to proxy, the proxy will first evaluate the default policy. So the default policy, this is your global security level. So everything are allowed. All right? So everything is allowed. But the proxy do not stop policy evaluation at the default policy. Okay? After the proxy will evaluate the default policy, it will not stop there. It moves to this order, VPM next. All right? That is why it evaluates the VPM. Okay? And in proxy, any matching rule at the later layer will always take priority. That's why we are seeing here deny. Okay? Now let's try and add another layer, which is Web Access Layer 2, the name here. And this time I will change this to allow. All right? So here on the left, I have deny. On the right, I have allow. And let me install this policy. All right? So install this policy like that. Click on it. Install. Okay? So this time, what do you think will happen if we are going to access the internet? We are going to access this website. Okay? What do you think will happen? Can we access the website? Allow or deny? Again, my default policy here is allow. I have my VPN policy over here on the left, it says deny. And then I also have here on the right, allow. Okay? So what do you think will happen? Let's try. All right. So I was actually able to access the website. It was not denied. Okay? So basically what happened here is, first, the proxy will evaluate the default policy. The default policy says everything gets allowed. But as I said, it will not stop here. All right? It will move to the next policy on this order. So it checks, because as you can see, I have two web access layer here. Okay? And are they similar layer? They are similar layer, right? Because it is both web access layer. So are they similar? Yes, they are similar. So if the layer is similar, the evaluation is left to right. Left to right is the evaluation if it is similar layer. Okay? Of course, rule inside a layer is evaluated top to bottom. Right? If you have several rules. And any matching rule on that layer, evaluation will stop for that particular layer. So if, for example, my matching rule is rule number 3. So rule number 1, of course, were evaluated because evaluation of rule is top to bottom. So rule number 1 is evaluated. Rule number 2 is evaluated, granting that rule number 3 is a matching rule. So rule number 3 was evaluated and it was a match. Rule 4 and 5 here will not be evaluated anymore. So what will happen then? The proxy will move to the layer on to the right. Okay, so in this case, we have 2 similar layers. So what happened here, let me just delete the rest of the rule. So what happened here now is that the proxy first evaluates the web access layer on the left. It matches rule number 1 because this is any deny, but it did not stop there. It goes to the right because they are similar layer. It evaluates it. It is a match also, and it is allowed. So ultimately, it used the allow rule, which is this rule. Why? Because as I said, if it is of similar layer, evaluation is left to right. Any matching rule at the rightmost will take priority. Okay? Now let's try to reorder this. Right? I can click on edit and then reorder. Now let's move this up here. So now the left side is allow, the right side is deny. Let's try to install this. Okay? So what will happen now? Okay, let me clear the cache of my browser first because as I mentioned, right, every time you do testing in proxy, you need to clear proxy or browser cache. All right, so now deny. Okay, so why deny? Because as I said, if it is of similar layer, evaluation is left to right. Okay, any matching rule at the rightmost will take priority. Okay, now how about for the Java VPM? Sorry, how about for the web VPM? Okay, so for the web VPM, let's refresh this. Okay, so for the web VPM, so we have 2 layers here. For the web VPM, I have layer 1. Okay, I have layer 2 at the top here, and I have layer 1 below here, right? Now remember, okay, though I'm just trying to preview to you guys the use of the web VPN, though it is not part of the training, but I just want to preview you what is to expect in the web VPN because this is the future. Okay? In web VPN such as this, because you can launch this, in fact, over here, right? I showed you earlier. This is the web VPN. This is the future. In web VPN, there is no left to right. Everything is top to bottom. Okay? Everything is top to bottom. So what is the evaluation then of the web VPN? Because it is top to bottom. What is the evaluation? The evaluation is any matching rule if it is of similar layer. Are they similar layer? Yes. Any matching rule at the later layer. Evaluation is top to bottom. Evaluation is top to bottom. Again, any matching rule at the later layer will take priority. So what is the later layer? This layer, right? This layer. Okay, so this layer is the later layer. Okay? So that is why, let's try and move this to the top there. Right? So now I move it at the top. Apply this policy. Click OK. So in this case, I move my any deny at the top, and then my any allow below. What do you think will happen now? Let's clear the cache. Right? I just want you to understand what is going to happen based on the evaluation order. All right? Let's try to access. So as you can see, I was now able to access it. Okay? Because any matching rule at the later layer, if it is of similar layer, will take priority. But will I be able to see it immediately over in my VPM? I won't. All right? You can see it is still the same. Right? If you look at this VPM Java version, based on the order I've been telling you, it should be denied. But how come I can access it? Because the VPM Java is not yet updating. So how do you update this? You may want to exit this first. All right? And then relaunch it. And then you notice that now it is updated. The right side is the allow. Okay? Why it is not updating immediately? Because the Java is also caching the VPM. So to see result changes, you have to relaunch it. Okay? All right. Now, let's go to the most exciting part. What if, as you can see here, I can create different layers, right? I can create different layers. So I can create this layer. I can create this layer. Okay, I can create this layer. All right, I can also create this layer. Okay, which means to say that I can create multiple layers of different types, right? As you can see, these are layers of different types. Are they different types? Yes. This is web request, this is web content, web authentication, this is SSL. Okay? So, we have different layers. Now, when I go back to my web VPM, right, I need to install this policy first in order to reflect on my web VPM. Okay? So, I need to install this first. Right? So, now, if I go to my web VPM, I will not be able to see it immediately. I need to refresh this page. Okay, then as you notice, it's there now. Okay, so question is, how would I know which layer I need? Well, depends on what do you want to do, right? Are you going to create policy based on SSL? Then use SSL intercept. Do you want to enable authentication? Then you create web authentication layer. Do you want to manage caching? Content, then you want to create content layer. You want to manage web traffic, then you create web access layer. All right? So it is important that you understand the purpose and the function of each of the layers, so you can decide what layer to use. Okay? So now we have different layers. What is the evaluation then? Because we know that evaluation is in fact left to right if it is of similar layer. And we know already also that layer on the right side takes priority. Any matching rule at the right, if it is of similar layer, takes priority. But this is of different layers now. What is the order of evaluation? So the order of evaluation is based on logical order. Okay, so it is based on logical order. So what is the logical order? This order. If you click on policy, top to bottom, this is the logical order. All right? So why this is the logical order? Let me give you an example. Okay? Let me give you an example. So you see that this is the logical order. Meaning to say that regardless of where I put them in the VPM as such, it does not matter. Because what the proxy will do is it will still use the logical order. The placement of the layer in VPM matters if it is of similar layer. Okay, because if it is of similar layer, left to right, matching rule of the rightmost layer takes priority. But if it is of different layer, placement is irrelevant because it is based on logical order. So let me give you an example. Why is it that this is the logical order? Okay, let's say I want to create a policy under web access layer that I want to deny user from watching YouTube videos, but I will allow them to access YouTube website, but I will deny them from watching YouTube videos. That I will create under my web access layer because that is web access type policy. So with that, what do I need to do? Do I just need to create policy in web access layer to do it? No. You need to think first. What is YouTube website? You need to understand the website you are trying to deal with. So first of all, you need to ask yourself, is YouTube HTTP or HTTPS? So YouTube is HTTPS, isn't it? There's no HTTP YouTube anymore. So with that, what do I need to do first? The first thing you need to do is you need to create policy to encrypt or to decrypt YouTube, right? Because YouTube is HTTPS. If it is HTTPS, you cannot see what is inside YouTube, then you cannot apply whatever policy you have in web access. Because, of course, that is the purpose of HTTPS, right? To encrypt the traffic. So when traffic is encrypted, the proxy do not have visibility over it. So what you need to do first is to decrypt it. And when you decrypt it, what layer you need to use? SSL, intercept layer. So where is that SSL intercept layer with regards to logic in proxy? As you can see, it is over here at the top of web access layer. Because you need to decrypt the traffic first. After the traffic is already decrypted, then we can apply policy over at your web access layer. Okay? Now here is another example. I want to create a policy based on user group. All right? So maybe I have a policy that for this group of user, I will only allow them to access certain website categories. So what do I need to do first to identify user group? I need to configure authentication, right? Because I want to identify user group. Without authentication, how do I know group? I would not. Proxy would not. So first, the authentication has to be enabled. So as you can see, based on logical order, web authentication is on top of web access layer. Because before you can create policy using your web access layer, this is the most common layer that we use to create policy in proxy because obviously we deal with web access. Before you can create policy under your web access layer using groups or user, we need to authenticate first, right? That is why it's here at the top of web access layer. Okay, authentication needs to take place because without authentication, how do we see groups? We cannot. How do we see user? We cannot. So this is the logical order. All right, logical order. So regardless of where you put them in the VPM, if it is of different layers, the order is logical. The placement in the VPM matters if it is of similar layers. Right? I can create multiple layers using different layers. It matters the placement if it is of similar layer, because if it is of similar layer, the processing is from left to right. Okay, left to right if it is of similar layer. So part of the best practice is, since the proxy will use logical order, it is a good idea to arrange them in such a way that it is in logical order also, so that at least you as an administrator would easily identify the order by looking at it. Right? So what you can do is you can rearrange the or reorder them. Even though the ordering will not matter for layer of different type, but this is just for administrator to easily identify. So SSL is on top there. Authentication is next, and then you have your web access. Your order of web access is very important because you have 2 web access layer in my example here. Of course, you can have multiple SSL intercept layer also. And then next is you have your web request and web content. So basically, as you can see, this is the logical order, left to right here. As I said, the placement does not matter if it is of different layer. It matters if it is of similar layer, because similar layer is left to right. Okay? So this is the order you want to do, because you know that this is a, so here, so web request layer should be over there. So we can reorder this. Again, web request layer or web content layer, move up. So based on logical order, this is the order. Okay? Likewise, administrator will have the ability to actually rename layers, right? It is common that people would rename layers. So when you rename a layer, you right-click and then rename the layer. But when you rename the layer, you need to make sure that you put some marker to identify what is that layer all about. So for example, this is SSL intercept. So maybe you would like to put SSL I. Okay? Then this is my SSL layer. This is whatever you like to put. So you know that, so you can see it changed already. So you know that this is my SSL intercept layer. Otherwise, if you will not put anything there, okay, let's say this one. Okay? If you do not put anything, how would you know if this is, with what layer is this? You would not know. The only way for you to know is to take a look at the rule, right? So it is good to always put something to find out what is this layer, web access layer. Okay, so you know this is a web access layer. Likewise, you can also rename this. This is a web access layer. Okay, whatever you like to put it as a name there. But so now you would exactly know what is this layer all about. This is a web access layer. This is a web access layer. I don't have to figure out by looking at the rule. Okay, so maybe now you are trying to ask a question to yourself. Can I create policy using just a single layer? Yes, you can, of course. You can, in fact, create whatever policy that will satisfy the organization's acceptance usage policy, web access policy, using just a single layer. No problem. But why do I have multiple layers then? Why do I need to create multiple layers like such as this? Okay, one of the reasons is that best practice is you need to start broad in the policy. Okay, meaning you can put probably all your deny at the left side here and all your exceptions on the right side. Okay, and likewise we have this feature, we call it layer guard. Okay, if you right click this, you can create actually what we call a layer guard. Okay, so what is this layer guard then? So pay attention on this part of the policy. when I create a layer guard. Okay, pay attention here. Right click, and then I create add layer guard. Boom. You see what happened? So when I add a layer guard, you notice that this was created below here. All right. So what is this layer guard all about? So let me give you an example of the use case of this layer guard. So maybe your organization, you have a group of user or maybe a subnet that you define several policies for them. Okay? So maybe, example only, so let's say guest user, all right? If the source is guest user, and maybe I have like, 10 rules for my guest user alone, okay? So I would consider using what we call a layer guard. Okay, I would consider using what we call layer guard. Why? This is where the layer guard comes into play, okay, in this scenario. So this is what will happen now. So now let's say a user will access the internet, and that user is not a guest user. So when it goes to the proxy, when the proxy hits this layer, it will evaluate the source. And the source of that user is not guest. So that user is not a guest. So all this rule here underneath will not be evaluated. So it will skip this evaluation. So what it will do, it will move to the layer on the right instead. So imagine if you have plenty of rule, you are saving the proxy huge amount of processing power because you are skipping evaluation of the 10 rules. Because without the layer guard, let's delete this layer guard. What happened? Without the layer guard, right, the proxy will read or evaluate all these rules to find a match. If there is no match, it moves to the next layer here on the right. So layer guard, in fact, will improve the performance of your proxy. All right? So you can think of that also. Inclusion list. Okay? So this is how it helps improve performance. Now, what if the user this time is a user that is a guest user? So what will happen this time? If the user is guest user, then it matches the source, right? Then this time it will evaluate the rules that are stated under the layer guard. So if rule number 4, for example, is a match, if rule number 4 is a match, it will not stop here. It will still move to the rule, to the layer on the right, and evaluate the rule there. Right? So if you are creating a policy, you need to have some form of consistency. You do not want to create a policy where you have allow here, deny there, like what I showed you as an example earlier. I did that just to let you understand what is going to happen. Okay? All right. So layer guard is something that you need to consider when you create policy in proxy because it improves performance of the policy. Okay? So that is basically the, let's try to install this, but it will complain because I have so many rules here. All right? That is just the same, so it complains to me. Just delete all this. And install this policy. So now it did not complain. We can go back here to our web VPN and refresh it. All right. So this is now it looks like how it looks like under our, you see here, guard plus rule. So let's expand this. So this is the source and this is my rule underneath. So this is my web access layer, my layer 1. Okay? Now take note again that in web VPN, evaluation is only top to bottom. Okay? Any matching rule at the later layer, if it is of similar layer, will take priority. Okay? Will take priority. Alright? So, if it is not of similar layer, what is the order then? Remember, it's only top to bottom, right? The order will still follow logical order. So regardless of where you put them, it will still follow logical. So let's say I will put this SSL layer at the bottom. Alright? And then install this policy. Install this. So remember, the web VPM evaluation is top to bottom, right? But based on logical order, you see, I move my SSL intercept at the bottom. So, but based on logical order, what do you think is the first layer that will be evaluated here? What do you think is the first layer that will be evaluated based on my example here? Remember, top to bottom and logical order. What do you think is the first layer that will be evaluated based on this order in my example here? What do you think? Logical order, right? So what do you think? Now you're confused already. SSL, intercept layer, guys. SSL. Why? Because as I mentioned, regardless of where you put the layer, regardless of where you put the layer, if it is of different layer, it will still follow logical order. Okay? So even though I put my SSL intercept layer at the bottom part, but because logically, SSL will always be the first based on the layers that I have configured here, so SSL will still be evaluated. Because the moment I apply this policy, like so, the proxy will actually compile this policy. When the proxy compiles this policy, it compiles it internally in the proxy. The proxy will then follow the compiled policy internally when evaluating policy. It will not rearrange how the administrator created policy in your web VPM or even in your Java VPM. It will not rearrange it based on logical order. Alright? But during compilation, it will arrange it in logical order so that it knows what to evaluate first and what to evaluate last. Understood? Okay, so we talked most of it, of this one, layer guard and such. So let's see what are the best practice. So express separate decisions in separate layer. Be consistent with your model. Do not create policy, allow, deny, is what I showed you earlier. That is an example, so you know the consequence. And use allow with caution. So why do you do that? Remember, if it is of similar layer, if you put at the rightmost any allow, whatever your policy on the left will be overridden by allow because it is on the rightmost. Use regular expression. So you guys are familiar about regular expression, where you're looking for a substring of a word in a string of words. So if you have, let's say, a URL, you're looking for, let's say you create a policy based on URL, object, trigger, destination, and that you are looking for a certain string of words on a URL field. Every URL that the proxy will see, it will in fact look for the substring of characters. So it is resource intensive. But that's not mean to say you will not use regular expression. Yes, you can. Why not? Okay? It's just that you have to be worried about using it. Place rules most likely to match at the beginning of the layer. So if you have a rule that is very popular, right? Put it at the top of the layer so that once that rule is matched, the evaluation will stop for that layer. Okay? You have to make sure, of course, that it will not change the way the proxy will evaluate the policy, right? What you want the proxy to evaluate the policy. Use subnet when possible. So earlier I mentioned to you about the use of the layer guard, and I was using guest as an example. So if guest is coming from a subnet, let's say you have a specific subnet for your guest user, it is best to use subnet instead of user or group. It's faster. And lastly, use layer guard whenever it is appropriate. Okay? All right. So now it is lab time. So with that, we have, in fact, a lab for this, and we have 3 exercises for that. Basic VPM policy. So I would like you to do this lab. Okay, so let me take you to the lab code. So this is basic VPM policy. Okay, so we have 3 exercises here. Starts at page 26, I think. Yep, page 26. Okay, and this one will end on page, let's see, 31. Okay, and so this lab, all right, so go ahead. This lab is about, let me see, because I would like to give you a break also. So this is 15, 17. So this is a, let's say this is a 30 minutes lab, including your 15 minutes break. Okay, so 45 minutes in total. So by then, you should have taken your 15 minutes break and finished the lab. Okay? So plus 45 minutes from now, you should have taken your break and finished the lab. Just right here, if you have any questions. So whether you want to take your break first or lab next, it's up to you. You can do the lab now and then take break later. It's also okay. So it's up to you. But within 45 minutes, you should have already finished both. Okay?